3, 2, 1, 0, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Donuts and Bikes, the mountain bike coaching podcast. Your hosts are Paul Howard and Christian Jackson, and we're here to discuss the skills, techniques, and concepts we've used over the last 20 years to improve your riding or coaching. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another episode of Donuts and Bikes. Today, we are so excited to be sitting down with Canadian mountain bike legend, World Cup racer, world champs, downhill, bronze medalist, Claire Buchar. For today's topic, we're going to be exploring the relationship between racing and coaching and how the two can influence each other. Claire, thank you so much for joining us. It is good to see you and Paul on a snowy day there in Whistler. How's your winter been?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks for having me. Here we are in the middle of a snowfall warning. But it's been a good winter. I usually switch over to skiing and put my bike away for just a little break so that I'm hungry again. And I'm getting hungry. I'm kind of eager for spring to arrive. So, yeah.
For skiing, are you a backcountry skier or do you prefer to ride the chairs?
I usually am just kind of sticking to the resort. I grew up ski racing, and actually it's a bit of a background there. I always thought I was going to be a pro skier. But then I lost a friend, my best friend in the mountains, when we were mountaineering. And so that's something that kind of haunts me that I still think about today, even when I'm in the resort. So I kind of stay out of the backcountry, to be honest. Yeah. And I swear that's kind of what funneled me towards a summer sport like biking, and it crossed over so well. So yeah, there's already a little bit of a background story.
I know what you mean though. Like, I've been coaching snowboarding for like 20 years, and people ask me like, why don't you do split boarding and stuff? And I haven't lost anyone personally in the backcountry, but I've lost sort of friends of friends. Yeah. And there's just been too many like friends of friends. And I'm a bit of a resort snowboarder because of that, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I'm even weary, down like back in Spankies, or like I know that they've bombed the resort, but I'm still always looking out for my friends and making sure they've made it down before I drop in or whatever,
That's why I like biking. Yeah. You don't die in an avalanche.
Yeah, exactly.
When you go biking.
Yeah, for sure.
But
that's a good
you're
sales
right.
pitch. Go biking. You can't die in an avalanche.
Yeah, you're right. The clarity, the clarity that a loss like that brings to what we do on skis or on bikes is pretty profound, and I really respect that idea there. Yeah. Looking through your resume for listeners that may not be familiar with, you've got a bunch of impressive items kind of stacked up here. I just want to let our listeners know about. So you were 12-time Canadian national team member. You won a bronze medal at the World Champs, and multiple Canadian national champion. We're going to talk about this later, but you're a Canadian national team coach. Very awesome.
Yeah.
And a graphic designer at Cro-Mag.
That's right.
Cro-Mag, just for our listeners, located in Whistler, is pretty famous for running a 4-day work week and having a shop ride on Fridays. What do you all do in the winter when it's snow? Do you go skiing, snowboarding?
Yeah, most of us ski. Yeah, ski and I mean, if Squamish is open, some of us will head down there to ride the mud, and sometimes it's actually pretty good conditions. But yeah, usually we all take a little bit of a break for the winter, because in Whistler, it's just, you kind of have to.
Right. Yeah. We've had some Western North Carolina locals that have been out on the Cro-Mag Friday rides, and
Nice.
confirm the legendary status of those. Pretty cool. Well, let's get into talking about mountain biking, which is what we're here for, our podcast. Let's start with just asking the question, what inspired you to start mountain biking?
Well, I grew up in Lynn Valley, which is in North Vancouver. And so on the North Shore, it was starting to kind of blow up down there. And I think just having, like I said, my dad worked for Grouse Mountain. He was in lift maintenance up there, and then later on up here on Blackcomb. But so we got free passes and deals on skis and stuff. So I grew up ski racing. I got put in the club there, and I just found that mountain biking, it just kind of was the same concept to me. You pedal up or you shuttle up, and you ride down point to point and you navigate terrain. So, and it's kind of like choose your own adventure. So it kind of crossed over really well. So I think that's kind of how I was drawn to it. And just having, some of my friends and my older brother doing it kind of made it more accessible for me.
Cool. Do you recall how you learned to mountain bike, the actual technical side of it?
It's so funny. All I did was follow the boys, and that's just kind of all that it was back then. It was literally, I was the only girl in my kind of group, and yeah, I just would follow the boys and try to do everything they did. And I think that I just kind of I did catch on and learn quite quickly because of my skiing background and just being, sports kind of being one of my strengths. So
I think that's how it kind of was back then, really. There wasn't
you just messed around. And
it was you want to get into biking, and it was I guess. And I just ended up following my older brother, and there was no coaching or anything. It was just get your town bike with crappy brakes, and my bike had chrome rims. So when it got wet, it basically, I swear it accelerated when I braked in the wet. It's just school of hard knocks, right? You want a mountain bike? Okay, cool. Just follow us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's funny. And I remember, I would just go out and you don't think about it. And I remember once somebody saying, "Wow, you hit the crater," and you're the first girl to hit the crater. And I remember when I heard first girl, I was like, "Whoa, oh yeah!" I just forgot that I was
just a biker.
I was just a biker.
Yeah.
And then, so that was kind of funny. And then I remember Wade Simmons being like, "You need to get disc brakes." Yeah. Because I'd just be piling around, following these guys. My brakes just going, wee. They're so so bad, V brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I people give V brakes a bad chat, but maybe it's just because it's been so long ago that I don't really remember. But I always thought they were pretty good.
Well, they definitely make you faster.
Yeah. I think I need to ride them now, and then I'll be like, "Oh wow,
I'm so spoiled now."
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want to learn more about us, please check out our first episode, which digs into who we are, what we do, and our background in coaching and mountain bike industry. You can also check us out on Instagram @donutsandbikes, or at our podcast, the Mountain Bike Coaching Podcast.buzzsprout.com. And now back to the show. Claire, was there a point it's this in this era of riding and getting excited about mountain biking that you ever foresaw yourself kind of in the position where you are now, where biking is such a central part of what you do? Did you ever have a sense of that?
I don't think I saw it this far, like to actually, have it, like be in the position that I am now, to be able to kind of mentor and inspire other people, and still be able to express myself on my bike, and brands still working with me and supporting me in all of those things. But I did definitely, from a young age, I knew I wanted to be an athlete. And I mean, like, I was a kid. I kind of always knew I wanted to be an athlete. I just didn't know what my chosen sport was going to be yet. And it kind of ended up it ended up being biking. And then I mountain biking, and I put everything that I had into that. That was my outlet. So I'm so grateful that it has taken me this far. But it's been a long road to be able to make a career out of it.
How did you end up in Whistler as a location?
So when my parents split, I was about 11, and my dad moved to Whistler, and then my brother, when he kind of left high school, he moved up here. So my dad and my brother were already up here. I was still in high school in North Van. And so I'd come and visit, and but I finished school in Lynn Valley, and then I kind of put myself through a little bit of college before moving up here full time. It was just like the natural thing to do. I kind of came here for the biking because the bike park was just kind of getting up and running. And that kind of points us to the next question on the list here. That's how I also met Janine. Well, my brother was up here, and he was kind of way more into mountain biking than he is now back then. And he kind of got to know the people at Evolution. And Janine, he kind of told Janine about me and hooked me up with a job there. So it was perfect because I moved up here and had a job right away at the shop.
How did that relationship with Janine kind of unfold for you?
It was amazing. I just remember being in the village. I think it was during Joyride or some sort of, like, I don't even exactly know what event it was. And then just this amazing, friendly, open lady. I mean, she's a little bit older than me, but I always kind of looked up to her as like this woman that came and like took me under her wing. I didn't have before that, I didn't have like a great female figure in my life because my mom had passed, and like high school girls are a bit mean, and like I was kind of the sporty type, so I was always hanging out with dudes. And so that was like, she really did change my life. It had a big impact on my view of women too, because those first years of racing was not the friendliest environment amongst the girls. So
did you find when you came up to Whistler and you kind of met Janine, and did you start to meet some of the girls riding racing at that point? And did you find kind of a crew, or were you still just riding with the boys at that point?
Still like riding with the boys and my boyfriend at the time. But then like I went to a few races because immediately I had to race. Like I was into mountain biking, and I was like, well, I got to try racing. Like I was competitive, and I needed to see what it was all about. And back then the vibe amongst women it wasn't like it is now. It was kind of, everyone was kind of fending for themselves to try to,
kind of survival of the fittest, sort of like
totally. Yeah. Like we're, and so I don't know if people thought of me as a threat or whatever, but then here comes along Katrina Strand and Lisa Lefroy. And I always tell this story because those two girls were like the most welcoming. Like they're just like, hey, Claire, come for a ride. We're going to go shoot this, a couple photos for this article on Tower Power. So we went and rode Tower Power on our dirt jumpers with rear brakes.
Holy cow.
No front brake. And it's so funny. Like ever since then, that was my crew.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That's crazy. Like for the listeners that don't know that trail, like like me sitting here now, I would not want to ride that trail
I would
without
never,
a front brake.
I wouldn't do it either.
On a new bike, let alone a dirt jumper. Like,
I know.
That's hardcore.
It was way more hardcore back then, I think.
Yeah.
Like that's what you did, but you didn't know any better. So.
Yeah.
But
I can't believe the stuff we used to ride on some of those bikes.
Yeah.
Like,
or even the tracks we used to race on those bikes with that geometry and the tires and the wheel size and everything. Just, It
was cool for me because I came to Whistler around 2004 and like coming from the UK, and then I used to coach in North Carolina for a few years. And I had never really, like, my experience mountain biking was like 0 women. And the first time I saw girls or women riding mountain bikes was literally when I came to Whistler. And I remember, I think the first Fat Wednesday I did, and I didn't really know one at that point. I'd like literally just rocked up and I had no idea what to expect. And seeing, I think it was Katrina or you, and then seeing you ride, I think it was in practice, seeing you ride by, and it was like, still to this day, it was like, I think it was the first time I'd just seen a woman like shred on a bike. And I was just like, I was so pumped. I was like, fuck yeah, this place is sick. Like, it's not just a bunch of annoying dudes. Like, and that was one of the coolest things for me coming here and just seeing there was still way fewer women riding then compared to now, but just the fact that there was some women riding.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it wasn't that, like, sure, I'm old, but it wasn't like that long ago.
No,
like, it's like the sport has changed so much in that regard.
Yeah,
I had mad respect. I was like, oh, this is sick.
Well, thinking back to those days and looking at your race results, your resume, what was training like for you as a budding athlete at that time? Like, what would you do to start excelling?
Well, I rode as much as I could, but I remember being kind of like locked in winter a lot of the year, and that didn't really help. I needed more time on the bike, that's for sure. So I did that as much as I could, given the season, and then I just also I'm not like this like naturally strong build, so I needed to work on that. So I got in the gym, and then
did you have a coach or anyone showing you like what to do in the gym, or are you just like
eventually
figuring it out?
Eventually I did. Like at first, I think I had this book. Like back then we didn't have like
the mountain bike book.
It was like how to like get powerful or strong. It was like gym stuff. And I don't know. And eventually then I got to know some of the people and the trainers at Meadow Park, and I started working with Diana there, and so I started a real program eventually that kind of would build my strength over 5 years, because that's really like you need time. Like you don't just get strong in 1 year. You need to develop. I guess that's with anything. So and then all of a sudden I had like a pretty decent training program, and it wasn't until
when was that roughly? Like early
2000s. Early 2000s, and then like, I mean, 2008, 2009, I was on CRC intense. So by then I was pretty strong by then, but I still could have, I wasn't in my like peak or whatever.
Yeah. Did the training evolve as you got more successful, as you got to like the World Cups and then on that chain reaction team? Did the training evolve? Did you get a different trainer, a different coach? Or
no, like I think with downhill, and this is the thing, there's such a difference even today with downhill. Like the athletes are so kind of on their own.
Yeah.
To create their own program and their own team around them. So you hopefully get a trainer at the gym.
Yeah.
And then somebody to teach you how to get strong and fit with your cardio. And then hopefully somebody that can guide you on the bike side of things. Back then we didn't have there were no coaching clinics really. Like it was, I remember Shams March was doing something in those days, and I attended one of those. I scrapped my pennies together, and because I was like, that'd be kind of cool to know if I could get any tips from him. But there was very little available. You just really had to learn trial and error.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think it's important to recognize that your race career that you were building at this point, you were doing largely on your own. It's described as being a privateer. Can you talk about how that process it's almost like seems like a blue collar work ethic, like just working really hard to make these things happen for you. How did that shape your race career?
I kind of look back and I think how crazy was I, because I didn't have the money, but I'd still go.
Yeah.
Like I just would make it happen. And I don't know what this drive was that I had, but it was something else, I tell you. Yeah. And that explains why I burnt out. But it was.
Well, I think it's just when you know there's something you want to do and you want to do it enough. Was it like you just wanted it so bad that it didn't matter what got in your way? You were almost just like pig-headed, like I'm doing it. Yeah. I don't care. I'm just going to do it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I'll deal with the consequences later or whatever. Like it was just like, it was just this like I was just like, had this tunnel vision.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to see how far I could take it. And I kind of at the same time, it was also kind of a coping mechanism for me with grief and loss. And I think that was like the outlet that I had. And it's the only thing I kind of knew how to do.
Just kept you busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like my survival.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's only now that I realize how long I was in that survival mode.
Yeah.
But
in hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight. But it was like, I mean, that's what it took to get it done. And I think other privateers that are going for it can relate. Like there's something that's driving them. And
you think back then you couldn't really put a finger on exactly what that drive was, or could you?
I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a combination of a few things. And one of them was definitely that I was trying to find, like trying to prove something to myself, maybe to the world, that I was worth something and that I could, it was like definitely some maybe not so healthy motivations. But I didn't know that at the time. That's just what I thought I had to do. And I think to some extent, any athlete that's pursuing a career or trying to accomplish something or achieve something is driven by some sort of like, need for validation, or it's like you have to be okay, there's definitely an element of ego, and I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like athletes have to be really selfish and self-centered. But you have to to focus on yourself. You can't let anything get in your way.
Was a part of it like, because I feel this a little bit with coaching and I guess my business life, but part of it, I don't think there's any shame in saying it. It's like, I'm really competitive, but I guess in a different side of the industry. And part of me is like, I just want to be the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I just want to be the best. And part of sort of my drive as a coach in the industry is sort of built around that. And it is really egotistical and it's really weird. I don't really know where it comes from, but does that relate? Do you relate to that a little bit
Totally.
With your racing? Like you just wanted to see if you could be the best.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know, like, I think it's just a very human thing. And I think it's a human thing, and it has to do with our design, like our individual designs as humans, but also what our environments were like growing up, like how we were conditioned. And it's really interesting, actually.
Do you feel like you grew up in a competitive environment?
Not really. Like, I mean, my older brother probably thought I was so annoying because I wanted to be, I know he did. I wanted to do everything he did. But it wasn't like I was competing with him. It was just like I idolized him. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I think like that definitely has something to do with like shaping myself into what I became. But yeah, I don't think it was a competitive environment. Like I wasn't like vying for my parents, attention or anything. Well, maybe, but maybe I was. Like we were like key kids, we got a lot of freedom. So who knows? Like what?
Sometimes it's like almost, I don't know what the right phrase is, like subconscious competitiveness. Like I think I grew up in a really competitive environment, but I was never really competing with my brothers, but I just had two brothers.
Yeah.
So
right.
There's like, when I look back, I'm like, there was inherent competition every day.
Yeah.
Even though there wasn't a competition. It was just like, I wonder if siblings or any listeners that have siblings can relate to that. Like if you feel competitive and you have that drive, like maybe there is some truth in that. And it's like that we grew up in a competitive environment, but maybe we didn't realize that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you could probably do like a survey and get data from like every athlete there is. And I bet you would find some common.
Well, I wonder how many like top end athletes were only children.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I did hear. I remember,
there's a study, right?
There's definitely some potential for a study. I remember Lee Donovan saying, because I think she had gone through a lot of challenges growing up, and I remember her saying once that, and I actually remember reading this again a couple times out when I was like out in the world, that a lot of top athletes have had like really hard childhoods.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think that's always the case, but I think it can drive whatever they've gone through, or hardships can drive people in certain ways. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, definitely. I think it builds like fortitude and resilience.
Yeah. And those things you absolutely need to, especially race World Cups.
And maybe a little bit of like an FU attitude, like, you know what? Life hasn't gone my way, so screw it. I'm just going to do what I want. Yeah.
Well, I think.
What do I got to lose?
Yeah.
Another way to kind of frame competition in this case is, thinking about when we compete, whatever it is that we're competing against, at race, the clock, climate, a certain route or whatever. We do that in order to bring out the best in ourselves, right? Like we don't really know what we're truly made of until we're faced with competition that may outdo us, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, go back to your idea of ego, that that concept of the self-interest kind of gets put in a negative light. And if you reframe it as that idea of, like you're bringing out the best in yourself, and like this challenge is bringing out my full ability, then I think it can transform a mindset.
For sure.
For a writer, for anybody really, right?
I know, and it's yeah. Go ahead.
No, please go.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, now that I'm kind of out of that competitive part of my career, and I'm kind of mentoring or looking after young athletes that are right in there, like they're so immersed in it.
Yeah.
And they're so in that, like, and they're so self-centered, and I don't see it as a negative thing. I'm like, that's what you have to do. Like I almost encourage it. I don't want them to not be so self-centered, because that's exactly what you need to do to be able to see how far you can get.
Yeah. I mean,
it doesn't mean you're going to be a shitty human being. It just means that you have to really put a lot of focus on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a fine line between I think people sometimes confuse, like, if you're focused on yourself and you have that goal, then you're selfish.
Yeah.
It's like, those are two different things.
Yeah.
Like, you can be an athlete and like
a good person.
And still be like, you don't have to be a jerk.
Yeah.
You can be focusing on your own goals, but still be a nice person.
And these kids are, they're not kids, but like these youth, they are really good people. It's amazing. Like, it blows me away.
Yeah.
Like, wow, to be that young and that switched on. And like, I definitely wasn't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you coach, have you had any experience coaching Finn?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought you had a little bit. Can you maybe talk to that and sort of, you see where he is now? What was he like then? And how was sort of your background, do you think, helped with you mentoring him or working with him?
It was, so his parents, Allison and Dave, approached Chris and I, because we had kind of like phased out of like World Cup racing full time. And we were kind of, I was ready for something different. I was burnt out of it. And I kind of felt like I wanted to kind of start looking outside. I was tired of being so self-centered. I think that's what happens eventually. And you start to want something more.
Yeah.
You want something a bit more meaningful, maybe. And so that was like a natural progression into coaching, was like, well, I can take what I've learned and that's really meaningful to be able to share and help others succeed. So it just happened that Allison and Dave approached Chris and I and asked us to, like, if we could coach their kids. And we're like, well, we didn't really know how to go about like creating a program. And so I just sat down with them, asked them questions, and they were like, well, we kind of want to do it throughout the whole season. And you work with them once a week or whatever throughout the season. And so that's kind of how Kvarek Racing came to be. It was really with the Isles family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we coached Jack and Finn. Yeah. Jack's Finn's older brother. And right away, I think the first time Chris took them out, I don't think the bike park was open yet because it was early spring, and he took them out and he made them hike up this sandy like slope and do cutties. Like he made
the gravel pit.
The gravel pit out towards Pemberton there.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, they were like, what are you making us do? Like, you could tell that they were kind of like, what the hell is this? But Finn loved it. Like he just kept hiking right back up and wanted to rail the corners, and Jack was into it too, maybe not so much, But that day I remember Chris coming home and being like, well, he's like, Finn, that kid's
something else.
Yeah. That kid's something else. Like he's like, he corners because he was a skier. He grew up ski racing.
Yeah.
And he really did corner like he was on his edges. Like,
yeah.
And yeah. So, and then the more we worked with them, the more it was clear that Finn had some serious potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like just in his head.
Yeah.
Like his skills were next level, and they still could develop and his strength could develop, but it was like his mental,
that fundamental kind of technical.
Yeah. But it was really like in his head, what was in his head between his ears was like, he really had it.
Good head on his shoulders. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that phase where you were transitioning, like you said, from World Cups and racing into coaching, teaching? Like that's one thing I'm personally quite keen to dig into and hear a little bit more about. Like, were there some things with the coaching and teaching that you just sort of naturally found fairly easy and, oh yeah, I know how to do this, I know how to teach this or coach this? Or were there some things where you're like, oh, I'm a World Cup racer, but I don't know how to teach this? And how did you go about kind of addressing those things, I guess?
Yeah, so it was interesting because right around that time, when we had to really, I think I'm like when I ride, I ride like it just feels so natural to me. Like, and I really am in tune with like all my senses, like, obviously sight, you have to look where you're going, but I also listen. Like I find that I've found that that's how I ride. I kind of like, I'm taking in all this information through my senses and I'm just kind of like letting it happen naturally. So when I had to start teaching that to somebody else, it was like, whoa, like you really had to pull back and think about what you were actually doing. And, but luckily at that time, I think we met you.
Yeah.
And so, we were able to kind of work with you a bit and like get those skills, like to actually teach the skills. But yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Like if you're a good rider, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to know how to teach it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we often say. It's like writing and teaching are really two separate skills, and obviously one will help the other.
Yeah.
But not automatically, right? And you could be a really good writer, but if you're new to teaching, you're still going to find a bunch of things quite difficult. And from my perspective, it was interesting because I remember when I met you guys I think I met you on the level 1 and then Chris on the level 2 PMBI course. And when I've had quite a lot of pros on those courses over the years, but for me personally, like you and Chris, I was like, holy shit, like you just come off the chain reaction team. I'd kind of just started PMBI.
Yeah. We were kind of starting the same time.
So for me, I was like, holy cow, what am I going to teach these guys? Like that was sort of my insecurities coming out. But then at the end of the day, I was like, no, like my specialty is not racing. My specialty is coaching and pedagogy and teaching. So for me, it was, I guess, a bit of a litmus test. It was like, if these guys can kind of walk away from the course and find value, then that's sort of, for me, it meant that at least I was on the right track. And how did it impact your writing? Like, not just your teaching, but did you find after doing those instructor courses did it impact your writing in a way? Or?
That's tough. Like it's really hard to pinpoint if it did, because I still, when I'm writing my best, I'm really just in my senses.
Yeah.
And it's just happening, like it's flowing naturally, but it did make it fun to know what was happening, like, and to just take a look at it closer and kind of like analyze it a little bit. And I mean, it made all the difference in teaching other people. For sure. Like being able to explain it in a way. I mean, we might explain something differently, but it's the concept of like how people learn, and how, like, I really liked the explanation demonstration, and then they can try it. And I feel like, people learn in such different ways. For example, like people are learning right now listening to us on the podcast, but and a lot of people will learn that way. But there's something to be said about like being out there following someone, like like watching, and then obviously doing, and like self-discovery. So it's like, I think it was definitely a tool that had to be in the toolbox for sure.
I always remember like I remember, I think it was on the level 2, and we were talking about teaching jumping, and I remember Chris saying like, man, I've done this for years, but I've never known what I was doing. And he was like, man, I wish I knew this when I was racing, because this could have really helped me out if he just had that like breakdown of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it.
True.
Because it was so like kind of like you were saying, like you have that background from growing up here and riding with amazing riders and working really hard with your training, and then that World Cup racing, it to a point where the riding almost becomes, it does become so autonomous. So then to try and suddenly think about what you're doing, when actually what you're doing a lot of the time is not thinking about it. I mean, that's why people love to ride, is because you basically get to switch off in a way. You're switched on in a way, but you're switched off in another way. And you get to just flow. But I think a good teacher is, in some ways, you almost have to do the opposite. You have to sort of rise,
break it down,
analyze, break it down, so you can pull out that little piece and then explain it or show it, or get them to follow you.
And then to me, that is so like, that's so fun and rewarding to be able to, like, I love to be able to explain that to people and show people like, if someone says, well, how do you do that so calm, or like, and you just explain it to them and they're like, oh, like, it's not like, it's
this is
not
something you can do.
Exactly.
Hey, and for the listeners, like, but for the record, like, I've had a bunch of, like I mentioned earlier, a bunch of pros on courses over the years, and some make for great teachers, and others maybe less so. But Claire was, I was always really impressed with how clearly you could articulate things, because either you'd gone through that. Had you gone through, is that sort of your learning style, where you are quite analytical, and then when you did transition into coaching, you were then a little bit more set up to explain it to others, because you have that sort of slightly cognitive process to it, or not really? Or?
No, like, I honestly don't think I'm very analytical with my own writing. I wasn't, but I can be. But I think that I definitely, like, part of who I am is I like to think that I can explain things. Pretty, like, communicate things and express things, where it's like kind of so that they can make sense.
No, totally. Just in life.
Just in life and generally. So that's kind of like not really something that I
does that come from maybe your mom or a friend, or is that just something you think you've always had, where you feel quite comfortable explaining things or communicating clearly? Or
well, I mean, if you want to get into it, I've been looking at human design a little bit, and it is part of like my makeup so I'm kind of, that's one of the things that I can excel at is expressing myself, and I like to, and I sometimes feel the need to. And I know a lot of people, like, I could pick out for my friends who who has that in them and who doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with it. And it doesn't mean that that's what you need to be a good teacher.
Yeah. But it would help.
Yeah.
I kind of think of it like singing. Like people say you can learn to sing. And I'm sure anyone can learn to sing. But I also kind of think like most people know if they have a natural ability to sing or not. Like as soon as they go to karaoke, it's either like shut up, sit down, or yes, you go back on again. Right? Like if I do karaoke, you will kick me in the nuts and just tell me to leave. Like it's not going to be a good experience. So it's sort of I know what you mean with that. I've always feel like I've been able to
absolutely you're one of those people,
or communicate. Like I remember being at school and like a friend wouldn't get something because the teacher would be trying to teach it, and I'd always be that kid like, oh, the teacher means this, or no, you're thinking about it the wrong way. And I wasn't necessarily any smarter. I wasn't necessarily getting better grades, but I could just take whatever information was on the board or whatever and just repackage it and then
guide someone,
tell my friend, and then they'd be like, oh, why didn't the teacher just say that? Like, I don't know. But
I think if you gave me something to explain, I could take it and explain it 5 different ways. Like, like there's different ways to explain it. It doesn't mean that people that don't necessarily like lean in that direction are bad teachers. I think there's a lot of good things about having coaches and teachers that have different styles because people learn in different ways. So
totally.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everyone. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Make sure you listen in to the end of the show where we reveal this week's Donut of the Week. All right, let's get back to the show.
Hey, I've got something I want to follow back up on with coaching that you mentioned a couple of times. You talked about this idea of your senses and riding in your senses, and I was looking at the amazing cover on the Free Hub from this past summer, where you're riding this amazing rock slab, and thinking, like as you said that, I was thinking of like the sound that riding a feature like that makes, right? Yeah. And I'm curious if you could maybe elaborate more about what that's like for you as a rider to ride in your senses, and then maybe give us maybe you don't have to divulge all your secrets, but like, are you teaching individuals how to do that?
I haven't really had a chance to get that far with somebody yet, but I think I've suggested it before, but I think it's so important. Like when I'm riding, like I like to have a quiet bike because I want to hear everything that my tires are doing. I want to hear everything that is going on around me, because it's like having such an advantage. It's like having an extra little spidey sense. If you can't hear, I don't understand people can ride with music.
Yeah, me too.
I never understand it.
I tried it once and I don't know why, but I tried it down Green Monster and I got halfway down and I was like, I nearly died twice.
Something's not right. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't do it.
Like, I think it'd be fun to like throw on the earphones and like hit a line, like something that you're on autopilot. Yeah. Like, but on any sort of, I just love, that's part of what I love about riding so much is like all the senses working at once. And you're just totally like in that state. And like, so like riding down a rock slab, for example, or following somebody, you're listening. What did it sound like?
Yeah.
What did that just sound like what they did? Well, it sounded like they hit there's definitely some loose rock on top of that slab, and maybe they didn't do it so well, or or you can
hear them skidding.
I can hear them skidding. So I'm going to try to enter this a little slower and not skid, or like there's all these clues that you're picking up as you're going along, and it's all happening in real time. And so I love that about biking.
Yeah. I had this cool thing the other day, which you reminded me of, where people and coaches will get athletes to visualize the track a lot.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember where this was, but the idea is the same, but you do it auditorily.
Yeah.
You try and visualize with your ears the track. So you try and ride the track, but think about the sounds in certain sections, which I thought was really neat. So the idea is that when you're visualizing the track, you're trying to match a sound with whatever you're visualizing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's happening there, what we're talking about is expanding the concept of feedback, because the sound that's being generated is a feedback, piece. We talk about a lot with if you're pressure control, you're actually feeling the energy or whatever. But that you're right. If the rider's in front of you is skidding, it's feedback that you're going to use then to make an adjustment, make
a different choice or make a better choice. Or right. Yeah, totally. It's well, man, so sometimes we do that with with kids we're coaching or whatever at the World Cup. So we kind of have them do a couple of exercises at the World Champs where they it's so funny too. And you make them close their eyes and go through the track in their heads. And one person, one guy was finished in 30 seconds. And we're like, whoa, well, you got down that track really fast. You're going to win. But yeah, it's so funny how long and short, it takes people and how they're doing it in their heads, and then having them go through and get the sound involved. Yeah. It's I don't know. I just feel like that is such an advantage. Yeah. They're really immersed in it, and they're going to, when they get out on course, they're going to remember, it's just going to come. Yeah. It's like you were there. Yeah. It's funny. I was chatting with the kids on our ZEP race team the other day, and we were talking about visualization, and we were trying to get them to visualize something, but in real time. Yeah. So if it's a 4-minute track, yes, your visualization should roughly be 4 minutes. Because I always remember this. I don't know if it was PT or Sam Hill. I can't remember, but it was one of the top dogs, and or maybe it was Miriam actually. Okay, anyway, and they were saying that they can. You know who it was? It was Rachel Atherton. Oh no way! I just remembered. She could visualize a track, and it would be within a couple seconds of her actual race time, which I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, so dialed. Yeah. I can't do it. I should maybe do it for a track I've ridden a million times, like A-Line or something, but that's cool. Yeah. Well, it's how we were talking about how I was training, and I finally got a personal trainer, and I was, doing all that physical stuff. Yeah. It wasn't until I started to teach myself the mental side of things that I actually started to see some serious results. What can you elaborate? Yeah, can you elaborate on that? The teaching yourself the mental side, or is there maybe something specific that you started with in that journey? Well, I think for me, I was I always struggled with belief in myself and thinking that I could do it, or that I could be on the podium at a World Cup, or I really struggled with feeling like I was good enough or worthy of being there. So I knew I needed to work on that part of myself. Because I knew that if you didn't believe it, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, you weren't going to get as close as you wanted to. And so I started. Actually, Kathy Sessler got me onto a book that I still have at home, and I still reference. And then from there, what's the book? Because everyone will be like, "What's?" Well, it's actually, I've got a few books, but. One thing led to another, and I started reading more and more one of my favorite books is called The Way of the Champion.
Yeah.
And then I read the book called Mind Gym, and I read a book, The Tao of Sports. And there's the other book was a really old book from like, I don't know, like the 80s. And I think his name's Steve Orlick. Anyways, he was a sports psych, and it has to do with like football and team sports, but you can like,
it's all
relate.
transferable.
Yeah. And I'd go through all of those like exercises, and it really like helped me to dial in my program. There's so much like so many things to World Cup racing besides being a good bike rider. Obviously having a team and support and mechanic really, really helps, but also just strategies, like little strategies, like, last year I raced this track and I recorded what the conditions were like. I recorded what my tires setup, my bike setup was. So I'm already a step ahead.
Yeah.
Like, so all these little tiny things that you can do. And then of course the mental stuff, like if you show up and you're the best rider in the world and you don't have a strong mental game, then you're like, literally you're nothing.
Yeah.
So why do we focus so much on training in the gym and training on our bikes and then leave this like 90% of the equation out?
Yeah.
And I think that obviously now these days it's a way bigger focus, like the mental side of it. But back then it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was like people just worked with what they naturally kind of had.
Yeah.
And didn't think about it too much.
Yeah. I from my sort of looking on the outside in, like, and as a coach for the past 20 plus years, like I've always seen that like World Cup racing and mountain biking, and I'd say cross country as well, as the physical stuff's pretty good. Everyone knows how to get strong and fit. The food's pretty good. Yeah. Because everyone knows how to eat well these days. Like that food science has been around for decades. But I would say like the two performance factors I've seen that hasn't been coached as well as it could be is the mental and the technical. Yeah. And you get some of those riders like the Finns and so on, where they're trying to race World Cups and his technique is not holding him back. No, clearly. It's like one of the best riders on the planet. I don't know if you saw his last Instagram reel. Yeah, I did. I saw it today. I was like, crap. Yeah, I just showed the kids that. I was like, kids, come over here, come watch this. I'm like, this is sick. Okay, Finn's on fire. But yeah, it's like the technical and the physical, technical and the mental, like especially on the cross country circuit, where I see more technical deficiencies for sure. But can you speak maybe to your experience on the downhill and maybe your experience either coming up or when you're at the sort of sharper end of your career, like on that technical side, because that's for us as coaches, we obviously spend a lot of time on that technical side as instructors. As coaches, we're more holistic, but we kind of wear those two hats depending on who we're working with. Absolutely. If you've got a rider for a weekend, you're more instructor, but if I'm working with my ZEP athletes, I'm really a coach, right? Mm-hmm. From the technical side, is that I think these days it's different, but what's your experience been with watching races and looking at that piece of their riding and how often was that holding them back or not holding them back, or was there ever a time where you felt like it was maybe holding you back? Or well, with me, it's crazy because I started biking and I started racing kind of really at the same time. Yeah. And so I was really learning a lot through the race, like throughout my career. You're almost learning as you're racing. Totally. Yeah. So, and I mean, like what it teaches you got to learn pretty quick. Like, so it's kind of good, but like when you said sharp end of your career, I could argue that now I'm a way better rider than I ever was when I was racing World Cups, but like technically, but I'm just like, my head is not in that space anymore. Like maybe it didn't align perfectly for me, how everything has to come together at once. But yeah, I think that needs to happen. Like that needs to happen for a top athlete. Yeah. So it's happening for Finn. How do you feel like if you the technical skills you have now, but if if you had them when you were
if I was a lot
racing.
younger. Yeah, if I wasn't so burnt. No,
Yeah.
no. Oh man, I have no doubt that I could have been
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah.
Like really, really great.
Yeah.
Like I don't mean to sound egotistical at all. I just feel like
I've seen you ride. You're like, for listeners, you're like the least egotistical person I've ever met. Like, you're the most nice, modest person ever.
Well, you know what I mean though? Like
yeah, totally.
I think if things lined up a little different, I mean, and people can say that about anything, but there's definitely, I guess, an element of, I could have done more.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, but now I'm in a different place and I can help other people do that. And it's like,
what are some of those skills that you feel like you've refined or you've developed since your racing?
Well, cornering, braking, pressure control, just how applying using your body is the weight of your body. So many things, but a lot of the things were in the head and like strategic. I mean, with racing, that's just like
more tactical.
It's such a big part of it. And then of course, like having a team and all that support, like would be huge for any athlete. But yeah, I think just being more aware of, like Chris, like you heard Chris say, like knowing exactly what was happening in that moment where you screwed up that corner and how you can hit that corner with better technique.
Do you think there's riders today on the circuit that you look at and you think, oh, I could help them with their technique
at a World Cup, the World Cup level? I'm usually just watching them in awe. But sometimes like you'll see like I've always watched all the women. So sometimes maybe not like the top 5 women, but sometimes you're like, oh, that like their position on the bike wasn't great there, or definitely you can pick it. Or you just know, but you just know that they're still developing. Like they have room. It's a good thing. Like you're like they still have a lot of room to improve because they're going to get faster. So it's kind of cool. But then there's like the top riders that you're like, they're there. Like they're incredible.
I think for some of those top riders, it's
so dialed.
It's more like tactical rather than technical.
At this point. At
that point, sometimes I'll see them, I don't know, get too far back or too far forward, or they're pumped too hard. And it's not a technical deficiency, it's a choice they make. Like, I think you should have stayed taller there, or not pushed so hard. So it more becomes a tactical thing than a sort of a technical deficiency. It's just the choices they're making. I think.
Claire, you talked about this kind of non-alignment between your racing and the mental game, the technical skills and the mental side. And how does that realization now like help focus your coaching for the folks that you are training to be racers?
Well, I definitely have learned a lot going through all of that and realizing my dreams and then coming up short on other dreams. But I just love to be able to share what I've learned. I mean, it just fires me up to be able to, I think it's all those little things that people don't see that happen that you're learning along the way, like all those little strategies and adjustments to your attitude or things you can control. And then the things that you can't control, like all those little things I love to teach, the little strategies and the little mental tidbits. because I mean, so with the national team, like I kind of got into before, it's different from cross country. Cross country is funded, and they have like a program that they kind of have work with coaches the whole year. With downhill, athletes are generally on their own, and they're kind of creating their own program. So when they show up at world champs, like you're there, but you're not about to change up their program because you're at the world champs. Like you can't do that.
You're not really their coach in a way.
No. Yeah. So you're just really their guide, and you're just guiding them and mentoring them, and you're there for them and you're supporting them. Of course, you can give them tons of advice when you're walking the track and watching them on course, but it's more of like you're there guiding them. If they have questions, you're not really teaching them lots of skills. Like they might have a question about, there's this super tricky corner, and you can give them skills advice, but yeah, you're mostly there kind of sharing your knowledge from more from a strategy and mental standpoint.
Yeah. How much do you
which is huge, man. Like if I had that when that is huge. Like just knowing
you didn't even have that.
No,
right?
And knowing that, like I remember being at a race and having like even Chris, like I knew Chris was at the bottom, like just knowing that someone was there rooting for you was like, it made such a difference when you were about to drop.
Yeah.
So just having that support network, it's such a boost.
Yeah. We often talk on race weekends where it's like, or coming up to race season, like the technical skills coaching really dials down, and it's really just, mental performance, making sure the physical stuff stays on top.
Yeah.
And then really in a race weekend, it's bike setup and tactics.
Yeah. Being prepared.
Just bike setup and tactics. Have you got your food? Where's your gear?
Yeah.
How's your bike set up? And then tactics on the track. Like, so much of it is just line choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Really. Yeah.
But at that point, hopefully the technical skills, like you've done the homework, and now you're just applying it. Really.
Mm-hmm.
Claire,
it's cool.
Yeah. You've talked a bit about coaching and mentoring a bit, and I was kind of curious to get your take on your role as a mentor to young people. Like, how do you see yourself as a guide of sorts of young people's life trajectory?
I think a lot of it too has to do with just like navigating the industry and like how to be an athlete. Like, of course, there's all these aspects to being an athlete. You've got to develop your skills and your mental game, and strategies at competitions or races. But just being, having been in the industry for so long and kind of figuring out what my athlete brand is, and just the way that it's evolved to now with social media. Like we didn't have to really worry about that back then. And now it's like athletes have all these different roles. And so I think in that sense, I can mentor people. I get a lot of those questions, a lot from parents too, like, like sponsorship and like how to kind of navigate the industry and build your brand, and how to present yourself and be yourself and like have your, you're not just a robot. Like you're not just a mountain biker. You're also a human, and you have other interests. And I think it's important to still show that to an extent, not just,
be well-rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah. How does it make you feel though, when you work with these riders? Like, do you get that sense of gratitude or that kind of privilege, or like, how does it make you feel as a coach to be a mentor?
I think it's exciting, but it's also, I worry and I stress for them because I'm like, I know that it's hard, and I've seen it happen, like where they soon find out how hard it is.
Yeah.
And then they drop off. and you're really disappointed, but at the same time you're like, well, they're smarter than I was. In a sense, I'm like, well, geez, they're smart. Like for this, like you really are swimming against the tides sometimes. Like it's hard to make it. But it's totally possible. So, and there, I sometimes worry about them, but I think you just can only guide them as much as possible. And I mean, most of the kids I work with or youth I work with have pretty decent support around them, like families. And so, yeah.
And these days, especially around here, they have
so many resources.
Yeah. Like we did a nutrition session the other night with our athletes, and like you kind of expect them to eat badly because they're teenagers, but like they're kind of eating really well already. And like, what any kid outside of this area would not be eating like that, but they're like, oh, I'm racing and I'm eating this and that, and you're like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Do you think in a way that environment can maybe, for riders and athletes these days, it could potentially put more pressure on them because, they have the nice bike. They've had that coaching since they were 8, and then they start getting into like, well, okay, we're at provincial titles, national titles, and then they start to maybe scratch on the door of World Cups. Do you feel like a lot of that it's kind of pros and cons? Like, do you think it might be putting more pressure onto some of those young athletes?
I think
versus
so.
Like back in the day where they're like, essentially people were just winging it and figuring it out on their own.
I think there's definitely something to that. Like, I think definitely there's more pressure. There could be more pressure. It could be translated as that. Like, even honestly, for me growing up, like, if my dad said he was proud of me, which I don't know if he ever did, but I know he is, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just knowing that was pressure enough.
Yeah.
He didn't have to say it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these days, these kids are getting these bikes and they're getting put in this class and this, and they're kind of, so yeah, I mean, I think it could put a tremendous amount of pressure, but at the same time, I feel like I don't know, like having been the kid that was like, had nothing to lose, like that gave me an edge.
Yeah.
So, if I think if a kid has everything, they can become great, but maybe they need that edge of like not having everything and having to fight for it.
Yeah. The fear of losing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
or just like nothing to lose to the point where it's,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could go, it's definitely interesting. The psychology behind it all. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, I've had a bunch of athletes say like partly what made them successful was it goes back to that sort of stubborn headedness that we talked about earlier, where they're like, I just never gave myself a plan B.
Yeah.
That
was it.
I just didn't even entertain the idea because I didn't want to accept that this might not work out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're growing up and you have all these resources and everything's kind of super comfortable, chances are you probably have other options.
Mm-hmm.
You could do this or that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting times.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just glad I'm not growing up. I didn't grow up with social media. Like,
oh man.
Cow, man.
It must, I know. Yeah. I really don't.
Yeah. Imagine being at World Cups and like, oh, I've got to just, I've got to do this. I've got to do this post or whatever. And maybe they don't worry about it that much, but.
Well, I think some of them have people doing it for them, but also, I mean, when you're at a World Cup, your number one focus is the race. But yeah, the athletes these days have to be so much more than just
an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're up there and you're winning or you're a podium contender every weekend, you kind of don't have to worry too much.
Yeah, someone's doing it for you.
Yeah, but I know it's crazy.
Well, cool. Start to wrap things up here, if that's okay with you all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Claire, thinking about the future, what do you think the future holds for you with bikes and coaching here in the next short term?
Well, right now I've got two full-time jobs. Well, I've got a lot of work like at Cro-Mag and just doing stuff in the industry. So I mean, it's so cool that I can incorporate this into my roles in the industry. But I actually don't have a lot of spare time to coach. So I kind of am just picking and choosing what I can do, like as far as like skills coaching. But yeah, I think I like to, I mean, I love doing things like this and having these conversations and being able to share my experience. I think that for me is such a good feeling to be able to do that. And so I hope I can kind of do a little bit more of that stuff. So like, you know, for example, like Ride Like a Girl, that program, they're going to have me speaking to their 25 athletes at the big start of the season. That's awesome. Which is so cool for me to be able to do. And then I'm going to be at the Dunbar Summer Series hosting a free track walk for any girls that want to show up. Last year we had a pretty big crew at each one of them. And then on course, just coaching and helping with lines and things.
That's sick.
Yeah. So like, that's like, thanks to Intense, because they're kind of paying for me to be at those events. And so that's what they want me doing there. Yeah, so it's just really cool. Like so cool to be able to give back to the sport in that way. Like that kind of fires me up, like that stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. When you see the little faces, and even my daughter, when she sees you, or sometimes she's,
yeah. What's it like racing a World Cup? Yeah, I didn't know what to say. I was like, well, it's really hard.
Yeah. She's going to be like, I'm not going to do it.
I know. I'm like, I don't want to discourage you. Because then I had to throw in but the rewards are just as great as the challenge. But it's true. It's true.
Yeah, you got to be honest. Hey, one cheap question to maybe wrap up for our listeners. Any rider anywhere, what's one skill they should work on to improve their riding for any ability level? What's something what would be Claire's top tip?
Cornering.
Yeah. What's something that in there? Have to pick one thing.
There's so many elements to cornering. Like there's so many things going on, right? Yeah. Like line choice. Every corner is different. Not one corner is the same.
Yeah.
But it's like the best feeling when you rail a corner, or when you're linking up corners. It's the best feeling, and it makes you a way more efficient rider. And if you're racing, if you think about, if you could shave 0.1 second in each corner by the time you get to the bottom, that's a lot, right? It adds up. So I don't know. I'm always like a big advocate of cornering.
Nice.
I know everyone wants to learn how to jump and drop, but and you know what else? I'm sorry, but body position.
Yes,
people are so mad at me for always talking about it because it's so boring. But you have to have that foundation to acquire any other skill, really.
Yeah. Well, I hear you there. That is
because that's a big part of cornering too.
when we're training instructors, it's like that's the thing we keep hitting them on the head with. Like 90% of the time, you're going to be teaching position and balance. Because if your rider is hanging out the back, they're not going to have a good time. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, Claire, we are very excited that you sat down with us for this conversation. And bigger picture, I think you are an amazing force in the mountain bike space. And we're just so psyched to share some of your ideas and attitudes about racing and coaching. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before we let you go, though, we need to talk about donuts.
Oh,
yes, we did.
Oh, do we? Is this a thing?
It is a thing. And we have a saying that ultimately donuts are very healthy for us because they make us happy, and happy is healthy.
Right. Joy is happy and healthy.
Exactly. It's scientifically proven.
It is. It is.
So do you have?
And you have to eat healthy, and eating donuts is therefore healthy. Yeah.
Do you have any memorable recent donut experiences?
Well, I am vegan, so I have. I mean, you can get vegan donuts.
Yeah.
And they're
I've had
really,
some good ones.
really good. I've had some really
I've
good
had
ones.
some really bad
I've
ones.
had people, really, have you?
Yeah, I've had some shockers.
I'm sure, because some vegan food is just, they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
But I know people that have had vegan donuts and not known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any location?
Well,
is there anywhere around here that does
that place en route to Mount Curry, where Bar Nork used to be?
Yeah.
They make it out of potato flour or something.
Yeah. No, I have heard about that place, but I haven't visited it yet.
They're like potato donuts. Like, it sounds weird, but they're really good.
They're good.
Yeah.
I'm checking it out.
And then, I'm sure that Purebred has something going on.
Yeah.
Maybe not donuts specifically.
I'm disappointed in them because I've never really seen them make a good donut. And I'm like,
somebody's got to do that around here. It's like,
look at all these resources they have, and they've never made a donut. I consider it a crime personally, but that's just me.
But yeah, anyway, so you get vegan donuts with me.
Okay. Awesome. Let's do it.
And I'm not apologizing.
Well, thank you, Claire, so much for joining us on the podcast. I think, you have such a large voice, so to speak, in the media world, that being able to get into some of these details, I think, is a breath of fresh air in the industry.
Thanks for having me and for being curious about what I have to say.
It's awesome. No, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Well, Paul, that was quite the honor to have Claire on the podcast. Really enjoyed hearing about her perspective on her writing. And I was really kind of thinking back and kind of hearing this theme that, writing and coaching for her transcends so many things, but, it's not just the technical skills that matter. And just hearing her talk about all the other aspects that go into good coaching and good writing was, I thought, very inspirational. I was really excited to be able to share that with our listeners. What kinds of things stood out from our conversation on your end?
Well, I always like hanging out with Claire, and I haven't seen her a lot the last few years, been really busy, but she, when she did do those courses with me, a few years ago now, one thing that always struck me is just how modest she is, and I love that. I've always found that to be a top quality in people, and I think not only is that really cool in terms of like her writing skills. I mean, for any of the listeners out there, if you ever get a chance to ride with Claire, like, she's so smooth on the bike, but also crazy fast, and she's fast without effort, and it's just a joy to watch her ride, and anyone that's been with her will say the same thing, and she's a good technical reference model. Like, you'll learn better technique just from watching her, because you get a lot of fast riders, they're not necessarily smooth or technically strong, they're just kind of good at not braking. Whereas Claire's smart, and with her riding, she's smart with her technique, and just you learn so much from just riding with her. But more just as a person, super modest, and I think how that impacts her coaching is really cool. She doesn't come at it from a place of ego, and she just comes at it from a really genuine desire to connect with and help people, and definitely a top quality from any coach out there is that it's not about the coach, it's about the athlete, and Claire is one of the best at that, for sure.
Yeah, I encourage our listeners, if they haven't seen any of the videos pieces that she's been in, to go and watch what you're talking about here, Paul. It's pretty inspirational. She was in a Crankworks Deep Summer video a few years back. That's really, really wonderful. And I think it really highlights exactly what you're talking about. As you're talking, maybe realize or maybe remember her identification of her internal drive, to from a very young age to be an athlete, to be successful, to pursue this. And you kind of see this in her writing and hear it in her voice, her passion for what she's doing.
Yeah. And personally, I kind of related to that a little bit, because some of the things she was sort of saying, but I kind of feel like for me personally, I kind of felt similar in terms of like just this burning desire to achieve this goal. But for me, it was more wanting to become a top level coach. But for her, it was to become, a top level racer. And yeah, so I really, really related to that. And that plus, she's just got a good sense of humor, and it's always good hanging out with people that make you smile, make you laugh. So yeah, really good times, really enjoyed it. And thanks so much to Claire for coming on our little podcast. And we can include some links in the show notes. We'll put some videos of Claire shredding, and you guys can all go watch that and be inspired. And yeah, good times. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and that it sparked some ideas for your writing and your coaching. As always, our approach to coaching is on pros and cons, not rights and wrongs. And with that in mind, our podcast is meant to be more of a conversation about topics and techniques rather than a final say in how to ride or how to teach. As always, please take care if using or applying any of the techniques discussed in this podcast. Stay safe, ride smart, and we'll see you next time.